On the agenda tonight, we're going all the way back to 1941. We're going to be taking a look at the Andrews Sisters, and they're going to be performing Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So, an interesting request, this one, going all the way back to 1941, to listen to a few voices that I hadn't heard before, or at least I didn't know I had heard them before, but then once I heard them, I realised I had heard them before. Anyway, it might be the same for some of you out there watching this video. It will just hit a familiar chord, and no pun intended, but let's have a listen to the girls. This is the record that was released, so the original version of the song, not a live performance, but we'll have a listen, and then we'll get into the isolated vocals afterwards. But let's check it out.
He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowin' reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam. It really brought him down because he couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand, because the next day the cap went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. A toot, a toot, a toot-a-toot, a toot, he blows it eight to the bar. In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar is playing with him. He makes a company jump when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. He was a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. And when he plays boogie woogie bugle, he was busy as a bzz bee. And when he plays, he makes the company jump eight to the bar. He's a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Toot 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 da da toot da da toot toot. He blows it eight to the bar. He can't blow a note if the bass and guitar isn't with him. And the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Boys to sleep with boogie every night and wakes them up the same way in the early bright. They clap their hands and stamp their feet because they know how he plays. When someone gives him a beat, he really breaks it up when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Da 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 da. Company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B.
And there we have it. I mean, listening to this song, it's difficult to put yourself in the scenario of maybe hearing this for the first time, or hearing boogie woogie, the kind of the style of music for the first time. And all of the music that we look back at, obviously now we've already heard everything, but imagine hearing this kind of music for the first time. It would be amazing to be in that scenario where everything is so new, and especially music going from jazz and then starting obviously then to get into rock and roll when we get into the 50s and then the 60s, and everything kind of exploded. But all of these new sounds. But the thing about this is the technical ability that these girls had to match their vocals. Obviously being sisters, that's going to help, but the really important thing about them being sisters is that tonally they sound pretty much identical, and it's such a unique sound. And I know that a lot of people listening to this will think, oh yeah, I know this sound, I know these voices. It's something that, you know, strikes you, that you've heard this in the background of either movies or, you know, sometimes computer games that are set, you know, way back in the day. It had this kind of feel to it. So it's great to kind of place where these voices were, but also these girls started out, I think, imitating the Boswell sisters, who were more in and around the 1930s, but then, you know, these girls started kind of late 30s, early 40s. This was 1941 that they released this song, of course, during the Second World War. So they were really at the height of their fame when the Second World War started. So they're very much, I think, tied in with that and had a lot of hits during that period, and, you know, kept everyone's spirits as high as they could do during that time. But it's this vocal ability, and when I go back to saying about them being sisters and their tones being the same, there's no point in having voices that sound the same tonally if you can't sing in different ranges. And this is the point here, that we've got a contralto voice, we've got a mezzo-soprano voice, and we've got a soprano voice, which means that the three sisters are going to be singing in different ranges. And now, why is this important? It's important because it means that they can effectively sing chords. Chords are made up of notes that are distances apart. If you're all singing in the same range, you might want to sing a harmony line with each other, or just sing a single line and hold those notes in harmony, but one of the singers might not be able to sing low enough and one might not be able to sing high enough, but they can all sing the middle note fine. But then, if you're trying to hit a higher note, you know, you might not reach it at all. So it's important to have that soprano voice, and soprano is the highest voice. If you're not sure the classifications, the mezzo-soprano is the middle voice, and the contralto is the lower voice. The reason that it is important that they've each got different ranges is because sometimes you can have a baritone. Let's take an example of this. Of the male ranges, you get a baritone. The great rock singers did in the 80s. They had baritone voices, but they extended their range to sing higher. Now, with a baritone voice, it means that your voice naturally sits in a particular place, and that's where you get all of your body and all of your tone. And as you go higher, you can hit those notes, but you can't do it in chest voice. Your natural voice doesn't sit that high up. It, you know, might start to max out at maybe, I don't know, G4, potentially a little bit lower than that, E4. So your tone changes, or you have to manipulate your sound to make it sound like, as you go higher, that's still in your range, or at least in your vocal classification. So this is why the male tenors, when they got up to B4, C5, they are hitting that in their chest voice. That's why they're classified as tenors, because baritones wouldn't be able to hit those notes in their chest voice. They'd have to go to a head voice, a lighter sound, or try and, you know, do a mixed voice, but you're not really going to get that in classical singing. But anyway, it means that these three girls have got the same tone, but they can each sing comfortably in these different ranges. One of them isn't having to go up to the soprano range, but actually, you know, she's a mezzo-soprano, so she has to try and force it out and can't reach it, and has to thin out her tone, and therefore now not blend the voices properly. So this is why, if they weren't these naturally different voices, they wouldn't be able to blend the voices, because the high note would sound different to the middle note, and maybe the low note, trying to go oh and try and sing too low for her range, it wouldn't blend. So this is why you get a great blend, and it just sounds like one voice. So just grabbing the guitar quickly, and I'll point this out on the piano as well, so we get a bit of a reference on there. But when we're playing a chord on the guitar or on the piano, we've got separate notes. So when you hit them all together, you get a nice full sound. Sounds great. Now, if you want to try and do that vocally, you need people who can sing all of these different notes. And when we're talking about the chord that I just played, we're going over 2 octaves. At least we're spanning 2 octaves, and even higher if you want to start extending the notes. But the most important thing is you need ranges that aren't going to be having to stretch to these notes. So that's what these girls have got. And obviously these girls aren't going, down to, the low G there, like a G2. They're going to be singing higher up than that. The D, the G, up to the B4. So when we look at our piano, and let me find where my arrow is, you can see that the C4 is here. And the B4 that I just played will be one below the C5. This is the C5. I've written high C because guys that sing might know the male tenor high C, just so they know where these sit in relation to that. But anyway, getting into these ranges, it means that the high note that I just played there, which is the B4, that'll be here. And then I went down to the G, which will be down here. And we went all the way down to the D4, so it's down here. So you can see that we've got all the notes of the chord that would be here, but each of the girls is singing their note of the chord. And of course, you've got to literally be able to sing it like an instrument, so you're hitting the notes that accurately. Because if you're out, obviously it's going to clash. All you need to be is slightly sharp, and then another vocalist to be slightly flat. And obviously the distance between those notes are going to be exaggerated because you're hearing them both at the same time. It's not one after the other. So their accuracy singing is just off the charts. And when we go back, obviously the pitch monitoring software is just picking out all of the voices. So all we get really is this range that we can see on screen. And I mentioned about the D4 and actually going up to the B4, so all the notes, because we're in G here, you can see the range that we're covering, but with all three voices. But let me just move it forward a little bit, and we'll isolate the vocal as well.
Plays boogie woogie bugle, he was busy as a bzz bee. And when he plays, he makes the company jump A to the bar. He's a boogie woogie bugle bar of company B.
And, listen to that vocal, how all over the place those notes are, but I'm talking about the melody of the song, not how all over the place the tuning is, because look at this, the B4 bang on, C sharp 5 just ever so slightly flat, but then back to the B4 bang on, and bang on down to the A4 bang on. The accuracy here is ridiculous. And here the F sharp 4 again, just bang on the whole time. And when I'm saying bang on, I'm not saying like auto-tuned, pinned to lines. This is just musically exactly where you want it.
Company B, he blows it A to the bar.
Even there, taking that slide all the way down to the E4. It is crazy, but this is the point that when we listen to their voices together.
Was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowin' reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam.
Listen to that. That is so locked in, tuning wise, and the intervals between the notes that they're singing independently, it's just spot on, to the point where it sounds like they've taken one person, recorded the vocal, and then done another take for the same person singing the lower line and the higher line. But it's great because it just got this uniform tone. The pitch accuracy is just off the charts, across the board. But it's the expression as well. We're ending the lines at exactly the same time. So effectively, they are like playing their voices like you get a great band playing their instruments, where they are stopping at exactly the same time. And that's what I refer to as tightness, when a band are just all on the same page and they're so well rehearsed, they know each other so well that they are just split second to their stops, their starts, their accents, everything that's happening. When I say accents, I'm talking about rhythm and playing, not the way that they talk. So all of these tiny details, timing wise, are spot on. And that's another element to it, that the timing is so tight, but their vibrato matches. When they don't end the line suddenly, you can hear that actually it's quite a fast but quite a wide vibrato that they all have. So even the waves match up. So it is like listening to one voice.
It really brought him down because he couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand. Because the next day the cap went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B.
I mean, I'm going to play this back in slow motion because I want to hear how great they are at ending their phrases at the same time. By the way, this is 1941. There's nothing that you can do to cheat here. To cheat, you know, I'm talking about modern technology, doing multiple takes, you know, overdubbing and using pitch correction, auto-tune, all of these things that artists nowadays have the advantage of. Back in these days, they just sang into a microphone, especially with this kind of thing, because they would all be round the same microphone singing into it at the same time. They're not recording their vocal individually and then kind of trying to, you know, get all the timing right and dragging it as you would do nowadays, you know, getting it all to line up because you can look at it on a screen. They're just doing this all because they're just so well rehearsed but just so professional with their execution of this. But let's listen in slow motion. And that B or me going up, which is very high for me as a guy. But you heard the little wobble at the end that was matched perfectly across all three voices. I mean, it's a tiny detail, but it's a huge part of the overall sound to make it sound as one. Is to not only match notes, match their pitches independently so that they're bang on, but to end the phrase at exactly the same time and vibrato exactly the same amount of times until stopping. And when I say that, what I mean is, if you imagine the waves of vibrato going, na, ah, you hear that in slow motion. That's what it would sound like. So having that ah and going ah, 3 peaks and then stopping, 3 peaks of vibrato, allowing that note to go up and down when you're holding it. That's the level we're talking here, that they're matching their peaks 3 times before then stopping singing. As I said, it's on a totally different level, but let's listen again.
A toot, a toot, a toot, a toot, blows it A to the bar.
And again, ba, 4 times that vibrato peaked, and then they all stopped. So, I mean, it's great that it's just this accurate. I'm not sure we've ever had voices that have quite been at this level in analysis videos before. We have looked at other bands, singers, artists, of course, the Bee Gees, when we're talking about family and brothers. They had different vibratos, and this is why this is unique. But again, another example, the Bee Gees having that ability to hit different notes independently, and that's why it works so well, because they could sing out these chords and harmonize with each other, hitting these different notes, because they had such a wide range collectively, but then individually they just sat in their own particular places for their particular sound. But yeah, getting back to this, I'm just going to let it play on, because hearing the isolated vocals great.
In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar is...
And listen to that, because now we've broken away from harmonizing, singing different notes of the chord, and now they're all singing the same note.
Note unless the bass and guitar is playing with...
And then we break off now back into the harmony. And it does sound like just the same voice. Yeah, multi-tracked. So I just want to have a listen to this vibrato, and we'll take it from where Patty, I believe, is going to be singing her lead vocal. And by the way, in the picture, we've got Maxine on the left, Patty's in the middle, and Laverne's on the right. So we'll have a listen to this, and just listen to the vibrato at the end of the line.
Toot, toot, he blows it A to the bar.
I mean, it's so smooth and it flows so nicely. We can see it's so even. And earlier, when I was talking about the peaks of that vibrato, that they're all hitting and then finishing at the same time, the peaks are here, the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the end of the note. So those would be the peaks that they're all hitting collectively, but because it's just Patty singing, it means that we can listen to her voice. We'll do it in slow motion, or listen in slow motion, so that we can have a listen to the width. And when I say width, I'm talking about pitch, the width of these lines, because interestingly, looking at it on screen, the D4 is the note that is being sung, but the vibrato is happening pretty much exclusively below the D4. So it means that we're pretty much, you know, a couple of semitones lower. We're almost going as low as that C4. So it is just a note that, like that. It's kind of going, it's going below the note rather than, and going above the note, which will sound a little bit more dramatic. But this is why it's just this really nice, even flow, really easy to listen to this, because it's not dramatic. So when you're listening to these ladies sing, I mean, it's always going to be the case with singers that are singing harmony lines with each other, that the whole is going to be greater than the sum of its parts. But when you're talking about the voices being this good individually already, that's why it adds up to something collectively that is just on a totally different level. I think it is a huge part of it that they are sisters, that they're related, in order to get that blending of their voices. Because when you have singers who aren't related and don't have that same kind of physiology or anatomy, probably physiology, to their voices, it means that they have to work at changing their tone to get it to blend better or as well as possible with the other person that they're singing with. And that's another side of singing altogether, learning to do that. But these girls have got this naturally, that it just sounds great when they put their voices together. They're so similar, they've got the different ranges, and I mean, it's just so pristine, this sound. But anyway, thank you guys for this request, and keep those suggestions and requests coming in the comments section below. As always, let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!